Good evening. So I think this is a very nice session because it sets me up very easily. There's a nice consistent story that's emerging from this about the role of green turtles and megaherbivores and what they do to seagrass meadows. So that's pretty much, I mean, the title says it all, I suspect. And I mean, perhaps in keeping with the level of discourse of the current zeitgeist, which is particularly important, I think, in Singapore today, I think my title should be closer to this. That's it. I think we can just go home. We can have tea. But if you want to know a little bit more, what I'm talking about is a group of islands. I've been working in the Lakshadweep archipelago. That's the coast of India. And I've been working on this group of islands since 1998. And in 2005, after I finished my PhD, which was actually on coral reefs, I'm a bit of an infiltrator in this crowd, I went to the island of Agathi and I started talking to people about trying to conserve these areas for fish composition. And I was talking to the room of local fishermen, and they all ganged up on me and they said, it's nothing to do with our fishing that's affecting the fish communities. What actually is affecting the fish communities is the green turtles. And the green turtles are causing a decline in fish. And so that started a huge number of studies that we've been doing since then. And we looked at the numbers in Agathi, and honestly, they were huge. I mean, this is something that we've been seeing in the Lakshadweep, but we've been seeing, Mariulan has been documenting this in Indonesia as well, and a few other locations across the world. We've been seeing that green turtle populations have been increasing at numbers that are unbelievable, that we wouldn't have been able to imagine only 20 years ago. And there's been a huge increase in green turtle numbers. And from the point of view of green turtle conservation, that's a fantastic thing. But we've also been tracking their consequences to the ecosystem and to what it does to human systems as well. And so we looked at meadows, and we tracked exactly what these meadows look like and their composition. And one clear thing that we see is that, well, green turtles eat shoots, and they eat shoots preferentially. And when we look at a meadow before the seagrasses arrive, you see that they're largely either Thalassia dominated or with a mix of Thalassia and Cymadosia. So the late successionals seem to take over in a meadow which does not have herbivores. That's what you'd call your pristine meadow. But very quickly, depending on how large the meadow is and the density of the green turtles, they are able to convert the meadow almost completely to barren areas or to areas dominated by Cymadosia. And some work that we've done in the past has shown that, like Mariulan showed this earlier, this is because of an apparent competition. The green turtles prefer Thalassia, and therefore they allow Cymadosia to become more dominant. But in time, of course, with more herbivory, these areas become barren, and then, of course, after the meadow is no longer able to sustain that level of herbivory, what green turtles do is they leave. So you have this mass migration of green turtles from one island to the next. And we've been documenting that from Agathi. In 2010, the populations in Agathi just declined quite a lot. And then they emerged in Kadmat. We haven't been doing any tagging studies. This is just by observing them, because these are a small archipelago of islands. Just by word of mouth, we know that the green turtles have emerged there. We've been going there every year. So we've been documenting the densities in Kadmat and seeing what happened to the meadows in Kadmat. There have been a sequential decline to extinction, almost extinction of the meadow in Kadmat. In 2012, they moved to Kavaratti. Very quickly from Kavaratti, they managed to decimate the meadows there. And by 2014, they moved to an island called Kalpeni, where they still are, the seagrass meadows still exist, and they still are in this mixed state of between Thalassia and Cymadosia. So that's what the green turtles have been doing to the seagrasses. And so we've been able to do a bunch of studies since then, and we find the standard things that you would find, that we've been hearing about today as well, that turtles engineer habitat structure. If you look at the Thalassia meadow, which is the late successional, in terms of the canopy height, it has much, much higher canopy heights than the mixed species or the Cymadosia, or certainly the barren. The barren has, well, obviously no canopy height at all. And of course, that affects the species richness of fish. In the late successional species, the late successional meadows have much higher species richness than the barren areas, of course. The total species that we recorded were something like 89 species of fish. Many of these were species that came in from the reef and from other areas. Most of them are rare, but a total of some 18 species contributed to about 90% of the total species pool. And affecting species richness is one thing, but it also affected biomass in exactly the same way. And if you want to see how that was before and after green turtles, that's pretty much what it looks like. So that's a dramatic impact. So green turtles, by engineering the seagrass meadows, are causing major declines in canopy structure, which is then affecting the fish composition. And many of these fish have value for fishermen, and if you take a look at those fish, sorry for this ugly graph, but that's the total number of fish that I extracted only the fish that fishermen used as target catch, and this was, you see a dramatic decline in the amount of biomass of fish for the fishermen. So no wonder the fishermen were upset when I first went to them to tell them that they should think about conserving and sustainably fishing. Okay, for them, they weren't the culprit, it was the green turtle. So, of course, what I would normally do after this is to put a bunch of values, that's in Indian rupees, I've got the values for all these species of how much they would do per kilo. We've done this exercise once in a paper a few years ago, where we estimated the total amount of ecosystem services and the decline in ecosystem services as a result of that. And by looking at that, it comes to quite a significant amount. The opportunity cost of having the loss in seagrass meadows is quite a lot for this local artisanal fisherman that is fishing these reefs. But that's not really what I wanted to talk to you about. My real title of the talk would actually be this. It's the dialectical turtle. Over these last few years, we have been grappling with the idea of what a healthy green turtle population looks like. We've been going to green turtle conferences or turtle conferences, and where the conversation is all about conserving endangered species and the green turtle being on the IUCN list, and about what a healthy green turtle population looks like. And more recently, green turtle population biologists have been patting themselves on the back for doing such a fantastic job about conservation, of conserving the green turtle. It's one of the few success stories, right? What is a healthy green turtle population? Can we compare them to pre-Columbian numbers? But then, is that the success of the conservation, or should we also be taking into account the fact that there's a decline of large sharks, which could also be keeping green turtle populations in healthy states? But of course, you can't think of the green turtle alone. We need to think of the green turtle in the context of the seagrass meadows as well. We think about pristine seagrass meadows, but we don't know what that is when we put green turtles in there. Obviously, you can't have large megaherbivores in a pristine state as well as pristine meadows in the same state. Either our idea of pristine for green turtles is wrong, or our idea of pristine for seagrasses is wrong, or something else is wrong, or our ideas of the pristine itself is wrong. And of course, what I would argue is that we need to think about, of course, the green turtle is going to be causing an adaptation of the seagrass meadow, which is then going to cause adaptations of the fish communities, which are also adapting. Because what I didn't show you is that while seagrass meadow species were declining, other species of sand-loving fish were actually increasing in these meadows as well. And then we get to the idea of the fisherman, and that's a species that I think we really need to think about a little bit more, because he's a very intriguing figure. This is, for me, the perfect example of an artisan. He's a person who goes and fishes for the family. He goes out every day to fish for the family, but it's a reified concept, the concept of the artisan, because this fisherman would not identify himself as an artisan. He is just a person who does what he does best, And in the evening, he might go off onto the coral reef and go and fish for reefs, which they are for groupers, not for seagrass fish. And now he's a full-blown commercial fisherman. And that's what we've been seeing in the, that in the Lakshadweep over the last few years, the amount of fish that is caught locally is just about 20%. About 80% of the catch is now going back to the mainland, and which eventually is leading that poor artisanal fisherman into global marketplaces. I'd like to leave you with this one thought, that I spoke about reifying the artisan, but I think it is a much larger reification about this idea of stability itself. We think about ecosystems as one single concept which needs to be in at one state, okay? And it's part of a larger concept of resilience, which I think is also something that seems to be a reification of something that is inherent in us. We think that it's a property of the ecosystem, but I would argue that it's actually a property of a human construct. And I hope that that's not too postmodern, but I actually do believe that the turtle is a dialectic agent which actually makes us imagine a little bit about what our concepts of stability are. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for letting us think differently. Any questions? Gary. Oh, yeah. Gary first.
Yeah, well, I think that I would probably argue with them to embrace that postmodernism a little bit. I would argue that if they were to imagine these systems as not a single thing, that it's a constant dynamic changing entity, we may be more comfortable with it, okay, and know, for instance, that the fisherman is adapting to changes in the fish community in their own way. And eventually, then there's not going to be a single stable point. We may be able to, I think that as ecologists we think of something as being stable and want to maintain it in a particular way, but that's not something that the fishermen want. The fishermen actually want something else. They want to maximize the amount of money they take back home and put in the bank. And if that commodification is an inevitable process, then perhaps what we need to do is to just get buy-in to that commodity market and see how we can preserve ecosystems to the best of our ability. I don't know if that completely answers your question, but yeah.
Okay, last question over here.
So I guess this is a bit of a baseline issue, isn't it? Where we don't really know what the baseline was originally. So at some stage, presumably, the turtles were at a population that was perhaps at this same level now. So is there any, or are there any data or any information out there that might suggest that when the turtle population was much higher, whether you had similar fish communities?
So this is something that I've been grappling with for a while, and I think that the reason that we keep thinking about modified baselines is because we believe that those baselines existed, that we are always harkening back to some kind of Edenic condition. In the 20 years that I've been in the Lakshadweep, there has never been a stable state. And speaking to old people who are going back as far as 80 years, or reading the old historical stories about the Lakshadweep, you find things changing all the time. I think the need to find some kind of a stable baseline is more a recent construct of the last 20 or 30 years of ecology. Okay, and that I think is our problem. I mean, probably this is a dangerous thing to say in this audience, but
I agree.
Thank you very much. So now.